Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Don Grennan with Continuity Insights, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, The Fatal Flaw in Your Emergency Plan, Effective Command Control Communications, which will be presented by Bo Mitchell, President of 911 Consulting. Today's broadcast is being sponsored by OnSolve. Before we get started, I would like to review a few items with you. Throughout today's presentation, you will have the opportunity to submit questions by typing into the questions pane of your control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them at the conclusion of the webinar. Today's webinar will also be recorded for later on-demand viewing, and as a registered participant, you will receive a link to this recording. I would now like to introduce our speaker. Bo Mitchell served as police commissioner of Wilton, Connecticut for 16 years, after which he retired to found 911 Consulting, which guides employers in crisis prevention, emergency response, disaster recovery, and business continuity. With 911 Consulting, he works with campuses, corporations, and medical facilities across the U.S. Among his clients are General Electric Worldwide Headquarters, MasterCard Headquarters, and Hyatt Headquarters. Please welcome Bo Mitchell.
Effective command, control, and communications. If this doesn't work, you have a fatal flaw in your emergency plan. This is Jennifer. Jennifer works for you. Jennifer is the perfect employee. Jennifer comes in early, goes home late, works weekends, get all her projects done. Jennifer, working for you, has 10 outstanding annual reviews. Everybody loves Jennifer. She's the perfect employee. Part of being a perfect employee is there's no family drama at work. She keeps to her work, no family drama around the water cooler. Over the last 10 years, we've learned that she has 2 children and she's married to Joe. And we've met Joe at a couple of social events over the last 10 years, but we really don't know what goes on at home. Turns out Joe is a monster. Joe is a monster. He beats Jennifer. He abuses the children in front of Jennifer. Joe's a monster. So bad has this become that Jennifer is sued for divorce, and so they're going through a nasty custody battle. And so she's gotten her restraining order against Joe at the house, the 2 schools, and at you at your workplace. But we don't know anything about that because she sticks to herself. No family drama at work. Not knowing any of this, Joe shows up this morning at our reception. And everybody goes, oh, isn't that adorable? Joe has brought flowers to his wife. So, of course, we give him instant entrance. He goes to find Jennifer at her desk. He drops the flowers, pulls out a pistol, and shoots her in the head. What do you do right now? You're down the hall in a conference room. You're walking around your place of business. You're doing whatever you're doing, and suddenly you hear the report of a gunshot. What do you do right now? This is intimate partner violence, a locution developed by the Department of Justice, which has studied intimate partner violence because it is so common across the United States. Intimate partner violence, reports the DOJ, kills 1,300 people every year, most of them women, in just this kind of scenario. Every 20 minutes, someone is injured because of intimate partner violence, and spousal abuse is epidemic. So this is workplace violence in its worst possible form. And on average, the DOJ reports that there'll be 2 workplace homicides in the American workplace every day, not on the street, in American workplaces just like yours. And is all this talk about active shooters in workplaces like yours just hype? Well, before Sandy Hook Elementary School in 2012 December, and Sandy Hook is about 23 miles from where I'm sitting right now in Connecticut, the FBI reported that these workplace active shooters occurred about once a month before Sandy Hook. Since Sandy Hook, it's once a week. Actually, now it's down to about once every 5 days. In a workplace, not on the street, there's an active shooter that kills 1 or more people. So what do you do right now? Do you run? Do you hide? Do you fight? Well, this is about effective command, control, and communications. And if you don't have this right, as far as any kind of emergency is concerned, this is a fatal flaw in your emergency plan, because if you can't communicate, you can't respond. And if you can't communicate, your people can't respond, which means they didn't run, hide, fight. They look like this, making them the next victims. Now, what's missing here? Something's missing here. And what's missing here is the surveys done by the New York Police Department and FBI, And in their surveys, and they've looked at a lot of active shooters over the last 20 years, almost all active shooter incidents are over 8 minutes, 8 minutes. And the vast majority, 90% plus, are over in 4 to 5 minutes. So what's the insight here? Police can't deploy in time. In a 4-minute world of emergencies, they can't get to you in time. Which brings us to first of many insights today. The police department and the fire department are not the first responders. They are the official responders at your workplace. And if they aren't the first responders, guess who the first responders are in your workplace? Your employees. Whether you like it or not, you cannot change the physics. This is the reality of emergencies in your workplace, whether it's an armed guy, a fire, anything. It's the first 4 minutes that count. Yet you have an emergency plan that's built around police and fire response, not for your personnel's response in 4 to 8 minutes. Talking about run, hide, fight, you have to do all this in the first 4 minutes. How do you command, control, and communicate in 4 minutes in your workplace without any help from the outside as far as police, fire, or ambulance is concerned? And I get this all the time. Well, we just dial 911, that's it, right? No. Let me remind you of what my mother taught me at a very young age. For every complex problem, there's a simple solution that's always wrong. Calling 911 isn't wrong, but it's far more complicated than that as far as your command, control, and communications are concerned in any emergency at your workplace. Fair warning, I will be candid.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? The truth. You can't handle the truth.
So we're going to see if you can handle the truth about your emergency plan, your workplace, and the safety of your employees. I am Bo Mitchell. I am president of 911 Consulting. I was police commissioner of Wilton, Connecticut for 16 years. I retired to start 911 Consulting to work with organizations like yours regarding the safety of employees like yours and facilities just like yours across America. All those initials after my name indicate that I'm trained and board certified 22 different times in emergency management, disaster recovery, business continuity, active shooters, chemical spills, bad weather, fires, all the kinds of emergencies that can strike your workplace. I'm also an expert consultant in landmark legal cases across America, from Boston to California, with the expected settlements against employers like you in the billions of dollars. And the negligence issues at court against employers like you are failure to plan for emergencies and failure to properly train your employees for those emergencies. I've been a speaker in all the places you would expect across this country, trying to spread the gospel of emergency management in workplaces like yours. Our clients tend to be large headquarters companies. We've worked at their headquarters and for their facilities in the field. We've also worked at 31 campuses across this country. So let's talk more about command, control, and communications as far as your workplace is concerned. And the first question up you can ask is, why should I care? Who cares about what it is that I do? As long as I dial 911, I've done my job. Well, that's just not true. How do I know it's not true? Well, there's something called duty of care. This is a legal principle that says that you are responsible for the safety of everyone on your premises as soon as they cross the threshold. And your lawyer will tell you that it's an affirmative duty of care, not something you get to next quarter or next fiscal year. You're supposed to have this in place. Now, I get a lot of pushback on duty of care. What does that mean? Well, that's one of those fuzzy things that no one really knows about. Well, I give 8-hour workshops all day long on duty of care. I'm going to give it to you in one slide. Everything is always your fault. If somebody gets hurt or killed on your workplace, that's your fault. Other people may be found at fault too, but you are the primary person because you are the employer, and this is your premises, rented or owned. And your duty of care is always about the employer. It's never about the employee. The employee has no duty of care in their safety in your workplace. Duty of care. I get a lot of pushback. Gee, Bo, that's one of those foggy things you consultants throw at us just to strike fear into us. Well, it's not so fuzzy. Let me read you your duty of care. Each employer shall furnish a place of employment free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm to employees. Ladies and gentlemen, that's your duty of care, defined very, very carefully about a virus, a guy with a gun, a fire, any kind of emergency, and it's been law for 51 years. Congressional law, federal law. So as we're having this discussion about our duty of care and command, control, and communications, we have to ask the question, if you know exactly where all of this gets played out on a piece of paper, and that's your emergency action plan. Do you have an emergency action plan? Well, please remember, OSHA is not a town in Wisconsin. OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Agency in Washington, D.C., which for 50 plus years has been writing regulations regarding the safety of employees like yours for all employers across the United States of America. They have lots of regulations. Here's the citation. And what that says is that every employer in the United States shall have an emergency action plan. Every employer without exception. Whether you have 1 employee or 1,000 employees in a particular facility, you shall have an emergency action plan site specific to that facility. And this is very, very important because we have to organize our employees as first responders and continue to respond even after the people in blue, dressed in blue, come to our place of employment. So these are the people who are going to make this happen and make you successful or have you fail. So there are lots of people out there who care about this. OSHA, the NFPA, who sets the standards for most of your fire codes across America, almost all of them. And in there, you'll see that you shall create a team of employees as your emergency team. You'll need a chain of command because you've created a department, so to speak. Certainly, if you created a marketing department or an HR department, you'd have somebody in charge of that department, a chain of command in that department in case somebody isn't there, and you would organize that department. Well, that's what you're being asked to do when you create an emergency response team of employees at your workplace. And you shall, under law, state and federal, alert all occupants of your workplace for any emergency at that workplace. So that brings us to the 4-minute rule. Now, the 4-minute rule you should be well familiar with is about heart attacks and strokes. The golden 4 minutes is called by the EMTs in your jurisdiction. If we can get to you in the first 4 minutes, you probably have a good chance of being okay. If we can't, your chances after 4 minutes go down, they plummet. But it isn't just about medical. It's about fires, which can spread very, very quickly. It's about guys with guns outside, guys with guns inside, tornadoes, workplace bullying, stalking in the workplace, more workplace violence stuff, people who bring guns to work. This would never happen in your place of work, but when it does, you have 4 minutes to respond. What about the theft of intellectual property or real property, an explosion next door, or somebody who dumps chlorine outside of your offices? So you shall create a team of employees. You need a chain of command, and you shall alert everybody in your workspace regarding any emergency at your workplace. So that brings us to command, control, and communications. Now, if you've been in the military or connected to a police or fire or a medical organization, you know about command, control, and communications. For those of you who don't, we're going to take you through exactly what that means. What does command mean as far as emergencies are concerned when they strike a workplace like yours? So you have to ask the question, who's in command in your workplace to take charge of all of your employees? Well, you need somebody. Let's call him or her an emergency commander who's in charge of your place. Now, maybe you have such a person. Yeah, of course. Our director of security or safety or HR, he or she is going to take over. Okay, fine. What about a chain of command for all emergencies? So we need more than one person because whoever is at the top of that chain of command isn't going to necessarily be there all 40 hours or 50 or 60 hours a week or 168 hours for those of you who operate on 24/7, 365. And these are the people who are going to talk not only to command and control your people, but also talk to the incident commander, that person from police and fire in your jurisdiction who shows up when you have an emergency. So that's the command part. What's the control part? Well, you have to organize your employees as far as your team is concerned. And at the top of that chain of command, you have got commanders and deputy commanders in case that top person isn't there, then crisis captains, as I like to call them, and searchers. It's a very simple chain of command, 3 tiers. Let's keep it simple during an emergency. But it's a classic pyramid organization of this new department, if you want to call it that, of emergency response team members from the ranks of your employees. So that's command and control. What about communications? If you can't communicate, you can't respond.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
And failures to communicate happen all the time in emergencies. In the military, the collapse of the World Trade Center The very best of us fail in command and communication during emergencies because it's very, very complicated stuff. And remember, you shall alert all occupants regarding any emergency in your workplace. This is in the NFPA Life Safety Fire Code, which is part of every one of your state fire codes across this country. So what are the goals of our emergency communication during an emergency in your workplace? Well, they come in three sizes. First, we have to alert everybody on the site. That's our obligation under law. And obviously, nobody knows how to respond until they know there's an emergency that has begun. And it's your job as the employer to alert everybody. Then we need to impose our command and control on the site, and we need to call 911. So this is a three-sided way of looking at emergency communications as far as the goals are concerned. Let's take them one at a time. First, we need to alert our site. That's in yellow there. And how do we do that? Well, and it's very basic. We have a fire alarm. Everybody knows what this is. This is a fire alarm on the wall. Its sole purpose is to alert everybody to a fire emergency in your workplace. Anybody can pull the alarm. A visitor, your grandmother visiting you at the office, an intern, any employee. They see smoke or fire and they pull the alarm. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, and it's present in every business place across this country. But do you have one for a tornado? No. Do you have one for a shooter? No. A bomb? No. Hazardous material spill outside or inside? No. An explosion? No. So it works fine for a fire, but even here, pulling the fire alarm can be something that we may not want to do, because if you're on top, if you're in a high rise and you're higher than the fire, you may not want to pull that alarm because I say fire emergency and you say evacuate. So we may be sending people towards the emergency, something we don't want to do. In fact, we may want to send them away from the emergency and have them go up, not down. So this stuff becomes nuanced and complicated very, very quickly. So do we want to pull a fire alarm with a fire? Most times, yes, sometimes not. So we have to be careful here in our command, control, and communications. What about a guy with a gun? We never want to pull a fire alarm with a guy with a gun because that klaxon goes off. People do this all the time, by the way, untrained in facilities just like yours. In fact, as you read the police reports on these workplace active shooters, almost always somebody's pulling the fire alarm because they think that's a good idea. It's a really bad idea because it confuses everybody that's going on, and they think it's the wrong thing, a fire, rather than the guy with the gun, and they may go out and get in his way. Not a good place for you as the employer to have sent your employees. So often we have to, emergency by emergency, tell people to never pull the fire alarm in that emergency. So we've talked about alerting people on your workplace. Now we have to move as far as alerting the site is concerned. So how do we do that? What are the practicalities of this? Let's not talk about it. Let's talk about how we get this done right. Well, the first way, in my opinion, that you want to do this is not a surprise. You want to use a PA system or all call on your phone system to get the word out immediately to everybody. Get the word out immediately to everybody. And these systems, whether they be a dedicated PA system or something that's connected to your fire alarm system, are great ways to go to get that word out to everybody instantaneously. And you can use all call. Just about every phone system in the country has an all call capability. You may not have enabled it, but it does have an all call capability, so we can get the word out. Well, there are limitations here. It's a one-way discussion. It isn't a two-way discussion. But it gets the word out very, very quickly to everybody, and that's our first obligation, is to alert everybody. What about cell phones? Well, cell phones are great. These instruments, the small computers in your hand, are outstanding. But we have to be careful here. They may not work everywhere in your premises, and the cell towers can be overwhelmed very quickly, especially in a city setting like Manhattan or Chicago or any large city. Not so large cities like St. Louis and New Orleans. The cell towers can be overwhelmed, thereby eliminating cell phones as a way of communicating. And they can be shut down by the fire department, the police department, because they don't want bad guys talking to bad guys. And often the police department will shut down the cell phone towers, thereby eliminating cells as a way of communicating. Because that's what they do if they run into a situation with an active shooter or other kind of workplace violence. And it's not a broadcast tool, it's a point-to-point tool. And that's a problem if we want to get a lot of people involved in what it is that we're doing in our command and control. So next we talk about our emergency notification, that's the ENS, and email. Now, emergency notification systems are wonders, and there are a lot of them out there, and they're great. But I have to ask questions as far as emergencies are concerned. What's the percentage signed up? The biggest percentage I've seen in a school, a nonprofit, or a corporation like yours is about 80%, and most of them are under 50%. So if we're thinking that an emergency notification system is going to be an effective tool as far as alerting people and keeping them informed during an emergency, we got a problem there if 20 to 50% of them don't know what we're doing because they haven't been signed up. Can you make this mandatory? Your lawyer will tell you, yes, you can, because you're required by law to do what it is that we're talking about today as far as command, control, and communications are concerned. Are all those phone numbers current? Because if we got something and people change their numbers all the time, and if they aren't current, that's a real problem. What about accessibility? Does everything work well inside of your organization regarding your Wi-Fi and cell towers? And is this drilled often? Because like any system, it has to be practiced in order to know if we've got everybody on the same page. What about panic alarms? They can be great, stationary, or especially used with people who are mobile or working late at night alone, this kind of thing. We have to ask the question, are the panic buttons going to the 911 only? Well, if they're going to 911, that's good. But if they're going to 911 only, how have we alerted our people? We failed here if that panic alarm isn't set up properly. And then what about two-way radios? Well, this is the gold standard of communications during an emergency as far as command, control, and communications are concerned, because these can't be interfered with, they can't be shut down. They're always going to work inside of your organization, or at least you should test whatever you get to make sure they work in your organization. And that's a process, but it's an easy one. So this is what we're going to look like, whether we're inside, whether we're outside, and as we're doing both, because one of the things that we're required by law to do is to conduct a head count. Both your fire code and OSHA regulations require that you should account for everybody during an emergency, not 3 hours or 3 days later, because you have to report to the incident commander when he or she asks the question, can you account for everybody? Where do I deploy my people to save lives? And the head counts have to include employees, visitors, and contractors. This is very, very difficult stuff. Now, we may send everybody to assembly area, and that's a great way to start building our head count, because we can see people and take a head count right there as far as a roster is concerned. Please remember, head counts are required by law as far as an emergency is concerned, and it is the hardest thing to do. Whether they be outside, inside, or a combination thereof, because, for instance, we're in a lockdown situation. Some people got out, some people had to stay in. It gets very complicated very quickly. So we learned very quickly that head counts are not one-time static events. Several head counts will be taken over the hours in order to account for our employees, which we are required operationally, morally, and legally to account for, and to report all of that. How do we do this? Well, without command, control, and communications, without two-way radio, cell phones, and all the rest of it, it's going to be impossible to do this at all, and certainly to do it quickly so that we can inform the incident commander about where our people are and who is in harm's way. And another thing that I recommend as far as emergency communications, as far as alerting the site is concerned, is the takeover of all computer screens. Because when this pops up, because your IT people have set it up, and they can do that. Don't let them tell you they can't. They can do that and take over your computers and laptops on your premises and alert to say active shooter run hide fight is going on. This takes care of the people who don't have phones with them because they're soft phones or don't have phones, and persuades those who are and motivates those who are deniers. Because there's always somebody who doesn't want to participate in the drill because they're too important or whatever. Or when the real thing happens, they just don't believe you. So we've talked about alerting the site. Now let's talk next about imposing a command and control on the site as the emergency unfolds. Site Wi-Fi becomes critical at this point. Good, solid, fast, robust Wi-Fi capability on your site. This is the way we're going to be able to use our instruments to conduct a head count, camera access if it's needed by the IC or your emergency commander, email in and out as far as notifying people on and off premises. You need robust Wi-Fi everywhere all the time so that these people can talk to this guy and all of you can talk to these folks, your people for whom you're responsible. So as far as taking, so there we are. We have a lot of things we can do as far as alerting the site are concerned. My recommendation to my clients is that you put all of these in play. Now, some people come back and say, really, isn't this over the top, Bo? Aren't you way out there? And my answer is, if you think this is duplicative, my answer is redundancy is a beautiful thing. Redundancy is a beautiful thing. Redundancy is a beautiful thing during an emergency when lives are at stake. The third part of our emergency, the goals of our emergency communications is calling 911. You may say, well, that's easy. Calling 911, simple, right? Wrong. Calling 911 is not simple, especially from a workplace like yours. Now, if the research is right, people are going to be using cell phones in 85 or more % of the time as far as 911 is concerned. So when you dial 911 from your cell phone or from your desk, doesn't matter, you're going to get the 911 dispatcher. What's the first question the 911 dispatcher is going to answer? If you said, what's your emergency? That's never, you've been watching too much TV. That's never the first question he or she asks. The first question he or she asks, this is 911, what's your location? Why? Because while it used to be so many, many years ago that everybody had landlines, then it was quite simple for them to identify where you were. You could not say anything and drop the phone and people know where you were. But in a world of cell phones and VoIP, that no longer counts. And they are the vast majority of phone calls that come into them. So what's your location is the first thing is going to be asked of you or any of your employees who call 911 from your workplace during an emergency. And God knows we want them to do that and do that as quickly as possible, because 4 to 21 minutes is the average response time across the United States of America. So you want to start that clock as quickly as possible. But then I have to ask the question, how many of your employees know the address on the dispatcher's screen? Do you have a vanity address which is not on a screen, like 1 Lincoln Plaza in Chicago or 7 World Trade Center in New York City? These aren't the addresses on the screen. They're quite different. Addresses set hundreds of years ago in older cities and decades ago in younger cities. So how many of your people really know what the address is of your place or remember it under a stressful condition where there's a guy with a gun or a fire or whatever that's going on?
You called the Forest School Police Department in Massachusetts.
Massachusetts?
Yes, Massachusetts.
Oh, there's no way you can help me, doesn't there?
Where exactly are you calling from?
England?
Yeah.
That phone call actually happened, and that is to a way out there example of exactly what goes wrong with cell phones, especially with cities or jurisdictions like yours that are in 2 or 3 places. The Twin Cities in Minneapolis, New York City with Connecticut, Long Island, and New Jersey, Chicago. It happens everywhere as far as this is concerned. They don't know where you are until you tell them. And you got to be accurate with that, and they're going to keep cross-examining you until you get this right. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, reports that 10,000 Americans die every year because 911 can't get quick, accurate locations. 10,000 Americans die every year because they can't get the right answer to the question, what's your location? So when you dial 911, you get these men and women, and they're going to ask, and they have no idea where you are. The CIA knows where you are. But 911 dispatch does not know where you are, which brings us back to command, control, and communications and your emergency action plan, where we put all this on writing so that we have a plan and we can train our employees to get this part right so we can set up a command and control situation using all of these facilities to get our emergency action plan successful. Great plans are a smart thing. Training is everything. If we don't get the words off the paper into our employees' heads, then we have failed them. You can't fail them if it's going to be successful. So OSHA says that training of employees for emergencies is mandatory of every employer in the United States of America. You shall train all personnel. You shall do so in a classroom. You shall do so annually. You shall do so at hire, and you shall use a qualified trainer, qualified by experience or training, across all hazards. It's not just a fire guy who knows about fire or a police guy who knows about guns. It's about everything that they have to be trained, and that trainer has to be qualified as far as experience and training is concerned. So that's the law of the land for every employer in the United States of America. So if you haven't done this in the last 364 days, then you haven't complied with the law and you aren't OSHA compliant. On-screen training can supplement, it can never substitute for the annual classroom training. Now, during the virus, OSHA suspended this and said you can train people on screen as far as the annual training or at hire or whatever the kind of training is that you're doing as far as emergencies are concerned. But of course, in just a few months, they're going to suspend that and sends everybody back to the classroom because, as we've all learned, that's the only way that this very, very complicated discussion gets solved correctly as far as training is concerned. And the training of employees is super important because these guys aren't the first responders, your employees are the first responders. And they have to get this right, not only for the first 4 to 8 or whatever minutes it is before police, fire, and ambulance get there, but continuing thereafter, because when the police and fire show up, that's one person, usually a police officer, joined by others over the next 10, 20, 30, whatever minutes it's necessary to get enough people there to take care of your emergency. You are still in charge of all those employees who aren't directly connected to whatever tactical situation is happening at your workplace. So we have to train the employees. And then I hear this from people all the time. Employees hate this stuff. Complete bull. That's just not true. One of the mythologies in my world that just isn't true, never has been. How do I know that? Well, well-regarded survey takers on almost an annual basis ask American employees across the nation, employees like yours, what's the most important issue at work? 85% come back and say that safety is the most important issue at work. Do you think this was taken all before the virus? Do you think it's even higher now with the virus? You betcha. And when they do this research, they ask for people to come back on all sorts of things. And it's safety that's number one, beating out all the things I thought would be number one: wages, leave, sick days, overtimes, unions. These are scattered numbers. There was no number two. There was one thing they're concerned about, and that's safety. So important as this is that I issue my clients a training guarantee. You give me all your employees for 2 hours annually, and I will give you back all of your employees confident in what they have to do with any emergency, including guns, fires, whatever. How can I make that guarantee and make it stick? Well, I have trained 39,000 employees over the last 20 years in workplaces like yours with employees just like yours. At the end of training, I give them a survey that they give to me, not to the boss. It's anonymous and confidential. They can say whatever they want. And 98.5% of those people came back and said they were confident now that they had been trained, that they knew what to do in any emergency. Now, I know, ladies and gentlemen, this level of success in training is not because of my boyish charm. It's because we made the training all about them and their most important issue at work, safety. We took the scary out of the discussion. We made everybody comfortable and empowered all to know what to do when the peat moss hits the fan. Most important part of that training is command, control, and communications for any emergency. So let's look like, how does this work or fail in a real emergency? Let's stop talking about it. Let's show you how it works. And that brings us to an exercise. Planning and training are required by law for every employer in the United States of America. It doesn't matter who you are or what size you are. Exercises aren't required by law, but I think they're one of the greatest things that we can possibly do in the emergency management world. So I love conducting tabletop exercises, and I do dozens of them every year. And there's a standard for this, the Homeland Security Exercise and Evaluation Program, for every kind of exercise, from full-scale exercises to tabletop exercises. HCEP is the standard as it's put out and practiced by FEMA. And I have been one of those people, and you can get a list of them, who've been trained and certified in a 3-day, 24-hour session, certified to be that independent facilitator of an exercise. I also recommend to you, in any kind of setting, a nonprofit, a school, or corporation, it's a great audit program. All your programs, or I'm sure your board of directors or your board of trustees want audit of programs, especially ones that are so important and required by law. How do you do that? Well, we have this great plan and we did train everybody, but did we really get through to them? Were we successful in that planning and training? Our battle cry around here is, a plan without exercise has no muscle. So let's exercise your plan. And exercises are the best way to judge your success, the success of your planning the success of your training, your drills, and most importantly, how your personnel behave and respond during an emergency. So how does this work? This command, control, and communications, a fatal flaw if you don't get it right, in a real emergency. So let's exercise you right now. The setting is your workplace right now. You remember Jennifer, our situation at the top of this discussion, there she is, and her husband shows up and shoots her. She's dead. This is a tragedy, but we're just beginning as far as this is concerned, as far as our command, control, and communication is concerned, because this guy is still active in our workplace. The research on this is quite clear to the 90 percentile that once he comes in to take care of whoever he's looking for, male, female, or otherwise, he is then before, during, or after going to take out a lot of people. Only 1 out of 7 active shooters are actually caught and prosecuted. The other 6 die at the scene at the hands of police or at their own hand. A lot of them commit suicide. So this guy is going to keep on going, and the research is very clear on this, killing people until you stop him or avoid him, which brings us to run, hide, fight. There are a lot of ways of training your employees about how to respond to an active shooter. I prefer run, hide, fight. And I very much use this training all the time. It's simple, at least in concept, and it's a good way, and it's a way of effectively training your employees. But we know now it isn't run, hide, fight. It's alert, run, hide, fight. Because if we don't alert people, then they don't know and give out that the fact that the emergency has begun, very important, and the position of the active shooter, then I don't know whether to run or to hide or to fight or in what sequence I should take all of those things. But you remember, we came back, and now as part of our exercise, here we are. We have to have a fast way of alerting the entire site, everybody at your workplace. So we use the PA and all call, and we get the word out. And here's what it sounds like.
Active shooter in reception. Run, hide, fight. Active shooter in reception. Run, hide, fight. Active shooter in reception. Run, hide, fight.
That was an announcement made by any one of your employees, because once they see this unfolding in front of them, they immediately go to all call or the PA, which you have enabled them to get to as far as accessibility is concerned, so they can announce that this has started. In a 4-minute world, if we lose 20 seconds at the top of it, the clock is running, whether we like it or not. And we can't change the clock running. So having made that announcement, suddenly our emergency team goes into play, and our chain of command takes command. They get their radios, they have their vests, and they start to command and control these people using their chain of command, the crisis captains and searchers, moving people around. The command and control part is enabled by the communications part. They're two-way radios. So there's your emergency commander. What does he do or she doing right now? He has been trained. She has been trained to go through this thing very, very quickly. Make sure that 911 has been called and call them again. That's okay. More calls is just fine. And we run into this all the time where people say, oh, I didn't call 911 because I know somebody else did. For sure. Really? Did somebody else call? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Lots of calls to 911 is not wrong. And we want to keep saying run, hide, fight over and over and over. You saw or you heard our initial alert that said it 3 times. We say it 3 times because people don't listen well under these situations. They get tunnel hearing, like tunnel vision. So we have to say it over and over and over again. Then we have our emergency commander keeps informing about the active shooter moving the location, because he is an active shooter. His or her, it's always a guy. His location is very, very important as far as your people responding, as they will on a retail basis once they know that the emergency has begun and the location of the shooter. And we use our emergency notification system. We launch it so that run, hide, fight, and location get out to those people who didn't hear it otherwise. And we can use our email and launch run, hide, fight as far as the location is concerned of the shooter. And we use the computer screens to make sure that everybody gets the word and they aren't dilly-dallying or in denial. So we're using our chain of command and our organization of our command structure, our command and control mechanisms to get this right. And these are the communications systems we are using to make this right. Now, even with all of these things, and I told you before, a lot of people think this is over the top. I don't think so. Let me quote a president of the United States. There's always some SOB who doesn't get the word. And this is a president talking about an emergency military situation of great fame where the military started to fall apart as far as the communications were concerned. There's always some SOB who doesn't get the word. Who could that be in your world? Well, maybe somebody, a man or woman, is in the bathroom and they didn't get it because they don't have their phone with them and the PA system doesn't work there. You knew it didn't, but you didn't fix that, and here we are. What about your CFO who's parking his car as he comes into the building in the middle of all of this, and he's going towards the problem, not paying attention because he's on the phone with a client or some other CFO some other place, not paying attention to your alerts? What about the guys who are outside smoking? What about the people who are coming into your building on a random basis, as they do all the time, to come conduct business with you or somebody else in the building? What about the guy who's always wearing earbuds? He looks very, very cool, but his situational awareness is now zero, and he isn't listening to anything. He doesn't look so cool now when he confronts the shooter. So we have alert, run, hide, fight. The alert part we talked about, and that's our command, control, and communications, but it keeps right on going. Let's look at run. What does run look like now in our exercise in your workplace with our command, control, and communications, trying to overlay this to make sure that we notify everybody so they know how to respond? Here's what run looks like. So there he is, a guy with a gun, a pistol, nothing fancy, just easy. Time and distance are the barriers that your people want to have as they run. They want to keep moving. He usually isn't running, he's walking. So zigzagging, crouching, moving quickly, that's what works, as we have seen in so many situations. Pull others with you who may not have gotten the word. Pull others with you. If they freeze, leave them behind. It's not your job to be the savior here. It's your job to make care of yourself. And that's the whole point of run, hide, fight, is that everybody keeps moving. Because if all of us are doing this on our own, then everybody's going to be safe. We want you to get out. And when you get out, to get far enough from the building to be safe. And once you are safe, command, control, and communications, you want to call 911, as so many other people are, but he's an active shooter, and we need to be updated on what he's doing and where you are to account for you. So that's how it works as far as the run is concerned with our people and our chain of command, using all of the communications devices we can, organizing ourselves to take care of our people, which is our responsibility. So let's move on to hide as far as command, control, and communications is concerned. Hide normally means a lockdown. So here we go again. What does that look like? Well, there's no escape. So you have to hide. Now, if you're a special needs person, running is not an option. So you have to know what to do, and we have to train people as far as our special needs persons are concerned. So whether you're special needs or otherwise, and you need to lock down because you made that determination that you can't get past this guy with the gun, you want to close the door, lock the door if it has a lock, barricade the door. These are two guys moving that. Two women could push that over in order to create a barricade of that door. You want to go all the way. This may not be the most effective way of doing it, maybe the B plan, but we want to do everything to keep ourselves safe. We want to gather everybody, and we don't want to keep the door open too long. And we want to make that room that we're in where we're locking down look very uninteresting. The research on this is that the active shooter will jiggle handles and keep on moving. So if there's a sound in there, that communicates to him that somebody's in it. So you want to shut everything off. You want to call 911 if it's safe to do so, because you don't want to give yourself away dialing 911. You want to get ready then for a fight if he should come through the door. A pipe wrench, scissors, a hammer, a paperweight, a broken mirror, a fire extinguisher. And then you want everybody to be quiet and make that room uninteresting, and he will jiggle the handle and move on, unless you think you're smarter than he is and you do this kind of thing, communicating to him that you know that he knows where you are. And of course, you want to silence phones, because no communication in this particular case is the best communications, because the phones can give you away when they ring. Only police department can clear you. So that's what command, control, and communications look like in a response as far as hide is concerned. Here are people working this constantly. So it isn't just a matter of pulling a fire alarm. It isn't just a matter of announcing run, hide, fight, and that's it. Your command, control, and communications are instantaneous and fast moving in the 4 to 21 minutes it's going to take for your police department to get there and start their action to help you. And we have to use our commanders, our communications devices across all of our supervisors in order to get this done. So that's run and hide. What does fight look like? Well, there he is. You're trapped. He's coming through the door. Do not freeze. Do not beg. This doesn't work. We have oh so much research, unfortunately, on that. You want to attack. You want to attack quickly and together. You want to scream, yell, shout. This is diversionary for him and good for your wah. Yell, shout, scream. You want to incapacitate. Your job is to make sure that he is immobilized. I love her. Your job is not to kill or incarcerate. You're not trained to do that. Use any weapon necessary to get this done. Aim at his head. The FBI, when they train this, and I've seen them do this a lot, they love fire extinguishers. Here's why. Ouch. Aim at his head. Then run, hide, fight. Run, hide, fight. Run, hide, fight. Run, hide, fight. Don't pick up somebody's weapon. Kick it away and keep moving. You don't want to be the guy in the building holding a gun when the police come through. So let's go to them the next step. We've alerted, we've run, we've hidden, we may have to fight. Now let's talk about how police are going to respond to your workplace. And this is very important. It's something at your police department, doesn't matter where you are in the United States of America, called the active shooter protocol. And every police department has an active shooter protocol, from NYPD with 35,000 officers to Tupateta, Idaho, where there's a deputy sheriff 2 hours out. Everybody has an active shooter protocol. What does the active shooter protocol look like in your jurisdiction? Well, it probably covers 10 to 20 pages. I'm going to give it to you in 3 slides. Go into your building, find the guy with the gun, kill him. Exactly what we want them to do. So what does that look like? How is our command, control, and communications enabling these people to find this guy and put a stop to this? Well, this is what it could look like. The police arrive. Probably only 1 officer, not 4 as portrayed here, maybe 2 officers. All they know is there's an active shooter at your workplace. So should we meet and brief them? Command, control, and communications. They need to know where the guy is. You have a lot of people spread all over hell and back who are reporting into you. So they want to get a briefing from you. They may check and leave wounded behind. They're going to check them to make sure that they aren't the active shooter playing dead. They're not priests, so they aren't going to console you. So when they run into you, they're going to assume that you're the active shooter because they don't know otherwise. They assume everybody in the building is the active shooter because they all look like us. And they want everybody to have hands up and hands empty. And we, as with our command, control, and communications, can keep informing everybody about where the police are, where the bad guy is, and how everybody's supposed to respond. As far as your people are concerned, again, more information here. Command, control, and communications. He is going to interview you. Now that he's determined you're not the shooter, to find out everything he possibly can and what he's getting himself into in a potentially lethal, for him, situation. So then you're going to be released. More command, control, and communications. You're going to your assembly area outside, far away from the front building, and you're going to run into your fellow and sister employees and more police officers who want to hear your story. Command, control, and communications, with your people at the top of the command, at the top of your chain of command, using all of these devices in order to organize and have all your people respond. And then we have people coming out, streaming outside. This is Chicago, this is Oregon, this is California, this is Missouri. That's what it looks like. Everybody with their hands up, hands empty. Now, we can say this all we want, but until we get people to listen to us and get this done right, it's going to be a problem. So put your hands up right now. That's what you're going to look like. We may ask you to do this sort of a military organization where we can see your hands and have people move around. Again, using our command, control, and communications, getting people out of buildings and safely into the hands of our police officers in this particular case. Using our communications devices, organizing ourselves, going to an assembly area and accounting for people. Our employees are the first responders, and head counts are very, very important. This is what it looks like at a university with people being lined up and being searched. This is all a function of accounting for people and making sure we got the right guy. Command, control, and communications. If you don't get this right, it's a fatal flaw in your emergency plan. So what's my action plan, my recommendation to you? Well, I can give you help right now. A copy of this presentation, and I have a legal brief, 13 pages long, the 10 Commandments of Emergency Planning in your workplace. All of the regulations, laws, court decisions that say you as an employer shall plan for emergencies on an all hazards basis. And there are all the citations that tell you what the law is about this. And it's quite complete. Then there's the 10 Commandments of Employee Training for emergencies in your workplace. All of the laws, regulations, all the things that are expected to you as from a compliance standpoint and training your employees. And you can have these from me free. Oh, and one more thing.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. Hey, let's be careful out there.
Command, control, and communications. If you don't get this right, it's a fatal flaw in your emergency plan. Are there any questions?
Well, thank you both. Excellent presentation. Actually, we have quite a few questions that have come in. And I wanted to also point out to you and to our listeners that one of our listeners pointed out to me that he missed part of the presentation, the beginning of your presentation, because there was a report of an active shooter situation outside his building as we were on the air. So getting back to what you were saying, Bo, about the frequency of these types of attacks, very real, as experienced by one of our listeners today. So we got some time, so let's jump into the questions. First question, Bo, is this individual says, I'm having trouble expecting my employees to command, control, and communicate during real emergencies. Is this for real? Have you trained employees like mine in this stuff?
I can say I have, because I've trained so many workplaces across America, employer in facilities just like yours and employees just like yours. There are a lot of people in senior management who think that their employees are incapable of being trained in this. I don't think that's a compliment that you're paying to your employees. This is the most important issue they have on their plate as far as what their issues are at your workplace. And yes, they are quite trainable. We train 18-year-old kids in the military to get on planes, go to far places, and go to work in a military situation. We can certainly train your employees to do this. Is it simple? No. Is it complex? Yes. For every complex problem, there's a simple solution that's always wrong. So we have complex answers to it. Can we train your employees? Absolutely. I've done it over and over and over again, young, old, and everything in between.
Okay, thank you, Bo. Next question. Our workplace is filled with employees who don't have desk phones, don't have a desk either. They use soft phones on their laptops. They're completely mobile all day long, and additionally, they have earbuds, and they're completely unaware of their surroundings. How do you work with a situation like that?
It's complicated, and what you've just described it makes it more complicated. But the technology that allows people to hotel and not have a permanent desk and use soft phones as far as their computers or tablets are concerned is the same technology we can use to make sure we get a hold of them. But we have to work harder on this because these people tend to be less situationally aware of what's going on around them because they got their earbuds in and they're walking around doing whatever they're doing at your behest. It's still your responsibility to make sure that they are trained to get this done right. How do we use our command and control communication in this particular case? Well, we ensure that we can take over their devices when the time comes and interrupt whatever there is that they're doing and alert them. We are required by law to alert everybody. That intern who's unpaid, your grandmother in the gift shop, everybody on our site has to be alerted. So we have to work harder with this particular group of people you've just described, but that's our obligation and we can do it. The technology is there.
Okay, thank you, Bo. Next question. Is it smart to use local police to plan and train our people?
Well, if you're putting together an emergency action plan and it involves active shooters, as it has to, and or other kinds of workplace violence, yeah, you should involve your police department. Their job is, but their job isn't to plan and train you. You may be able, because you have a good relationship with your police department, to have somebody come in from the police department and talk about run, hide, fight. But he or she is going to be basically talking about how they behave, because that's their job. Their job is not to plan and train for you in a workplace. They know that you have the duty of care and the regulations are on you to make this happen. Does that mean they can't come in and tell you how they're going to operate? That's a great idea, because you need to know how they're going to operate. But you haven't fit with their presentation, whatever that may be. And we always like our boys, our brothers and sisters in blue to do that. It's still your obligation to plan with your command, control, and communications to get this done. Things that they can't do for you, either in the planning, the training, and most importantly, in the actual execution. Their job is to come in the building, find the guy with the gun, and kill him. Your job is to organize everybody else to get them out of the way.
Okay. Our next question, our listener says, I like the computer messaging, especially with the work from home hybrid model. Do you recommend using floor wardens to assist with this, or is it better to rely on everyone at the same training level?
No, you do want to, it depends on your size. If we're in schools, we make everybody part of the emergency team, because they have a lot of kids to take care of. But in corporations, we classically have a group of people who are commanders, captains, and searchers. We don't want everybody doing everything. You wouldn't organize a department like that, right? You wouldn't organize HR or safety or your marketing department where everybody does everything. That doesn't make sense. You want to organize it so that their delegation, people have roles to play, job descriptions, and they go ahead and play those job descriptions when the time comes. So you want to really organize this stuff, because if you don't organize it, it's going to be chaotic. And order and counter order create disorder. So you got to have everybody clear on what it is that we're doing here as far as our command, control, communications are concerned, our chain of command, and the roles that each and every one of us must play.
Thank you for clarifying that for us, Paul. Our next question is, what if my CEO just doesn't believe any of this is going to happen at our workplace?
Well, this is the biggest obstacle I run into in corporations, nonprofits, and believe it or not, in colleges, universities, and K through 12, private and public, and that is denial at the top. We're nice people, and bad things don't happen to nice people. Or that happens to them. I keep asking to meet them. Nobody's introduced me to them. This happens to them, not to us. Or we're a family, which is really scary when you look at the intimate partner violence statistics and the workplace violence statistics about family members and intimate partners. So the biggest problem we have in your organization is denial. And you may be sitting there and say, well, this is all a great idea, but if I go into the boss or to the boss's boss and say this, they're going to roll their eyes and say, get out of my office. I don't want to talk about this. Denial is a real problem, and you're going to have to work your way through that. Maybe you can use your police department to help you do that. Maybe you can use your fire department. Maybe you can find an outside expert who can help you, because there are plenty of people who are jurisdiction by jurisdiction, wherever you are, who can help you put this together.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, I think we have time for one more question here before we have to close things up. The question is, and I know you touched on this early, Bo, but if I don't own the building and I am a tenant, isn't all this the landlord's problem?
A resounding no. Another mythology. Oh, we're just one of 10, 20, 30 tenants in the building, so it must be the landlord's problem. Well, the landlord has responsibilities. None of them are about training, planning and training for your people in his space. The regulations read, the employer shall. You are the employer. You have the duty of care. Your landlord has no duty of care as far as training, planning and training for employees. His duty of care in most cities, especially in New York City, is to organize everybody as far as command, control, communications are from him are concerned, because he has many tenants he has to worry about. You're just one of them. So he does not have an emergency action plan, and he has never trained your employees, and he never will. It's not in his strike zone, and he doesn't want to take the time and energy to do that. He just wants your check every month. So your landlord is not a help. but you should coordinate with him because you are in a building with other people, most of whom don't have a plan and have never trained it. That's just the way it is. And your landlord may be part of the problem because especially when it comes to alerts and command and control of your people after they leave your workspace, that's a real issue. So you need to coordinate with your property manager or your landlord to get this right. It's not easy. This is not fun, but we aren't in the fun and easy business.
Okay, let's try and squeeze in one last question here, Bo. How do you address the senior leadership who will presume it will develop more fear rather than diminish it?
They're already afraid. We have the research. And we've been doing it for years, decades. They are concerned about safety in the workplace. They're already afraid. You're behind if you think this kind of thing. You're not leading your people. They're leading you, and that's not a good place to be when you're an employer who has duty of care. They want you to come to them and say, "We understand you're afraid. We understand safety is an issue in your mind. It's real. All we got to do is turn on the TV, and we got to take care of this. So we've got a plan, and we're training you now." They will welcome that. This isn't fear mongering amongst your employees. They're already there, and you're behind them. So you need to catch up.
Okay, thanks, Bo. Hey, unfortunately, we've run out of time today. We had a lot of great questions. Excellent presentation, Bo. I want to thank you again. I want to let everybody know that if we didn't get to your question today, or if you think of new ones, you can reach out to Bo directly. You see his contact information, his phone, and his email is on the website. I urge you, if you do have questions, to reach out to him directly. And I've had a number of requests already for folks wanting to know if this presentation will be available. Yes, you will be receiving an email from me tomorrow with a link to the on-demand version of this webinar. Additionally, that email will contain links for you to be able to download the slides, post-slide presentation. I've had a number of requests for that. And also the resources that Bo referenced earlier, including the 10 Commandments of Emergency Planning in your workplace. So those will all be available. Be sure to look for that email from me tomorrow. So thank you again, Bo, and excellent job. Always very informative information that you present, and we're thankful for that. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar, The Fatal Flaw in Your Emergency Plan, Effective Command Control Communications. On behalf of Continuity Insights and our corporate sponsor, OnSolve, we hope you enjoyed today's presentation. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.